What's up, guys? On today's podcast, I got the legend of the real estate industry, Vinny, Tracey. What's up, Vinny?
What's up, Grubb?
Thanks for coming out, man.
Hey,
I appreciate
my
you doing
pleasure. This is awesome.
Yeah,
thanks.
You have a very good voice for podcasts. I already feel intimidated.
Oh my God.
I really appreciate you coming out. I mean, just for our viewers and our listeners, a lot of the conversations that we've had in the history of really the real estate world, kind of give everybody a little bit of a background on your history and your career over the last 40 years.
Okay. Yeah, last 40 years, imagine that. Well, I started in the real estate industry in 1977, and I started with a company that really nobody knew the name of. You always know that happens is I had a job offer from Johnson & Johnson at the time, and my mom begged me to take that job. She goes, "Oh, that's a company somebody's heard of." Well, the little company that I joined back in 1977 was Remax. And at that point, it had less than 400 agents in maybe 5 states.
Was it originally called Remax?
It was. And the Remax, the famous story about it is they were drinking tequila, and they came up, they looked at the name Exxon, which was an oil company back in the day, and they loved the way the X looked and all that sort of thing. And finally, they had enough tequila that it came out as Real Estate Maximums, what would be short as Remax. And that's the way the company was named.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So what was sort of your role in the early days? I mean, when you started there wasn't, now Remax has 100,000 agents, and when you started there were 100, 400?
Less than 400. Yeah, when I retired, I was there for 38 years, and I retired as a worldwide president. So when I retired, I think we had 105 or 110,000. At one time, we were up to 121,000, but the recession hit and devastated everyone. So Remax at that point went from 121,000 down to about 85,000 agents. And then finally, after about 2011-12, started to build it back up and got it to 105, 110,000 at that point.
Wow. And did your role evolve over the years in that? Like, kind of unpack that.
It did. When I first started, I started out in franchise sales, and that was kind of a fun thing, talking about the 100% commission concept when the best commission split you could get at a company was a 50-50, and it might go to 60-40, but you'd get there sometime in the middle of November. You might have one more closing, and then you go back to 50-50. When we entered Canada, the best commission split you could get was 45% for the agent and 55% for the company, because there were 5 major real estate companies that controlled 80% of the business up there, and they were all related to banks. So I started in those early days selling franchises, and, like any 24-year-old kid, when you first come into a business, it isn't that you have ego, but you have no fear. And my no fear was I went to their initial franchise training in Denver, Colorado, with probably had 5 other people in my training class, and the guy that taught the class was a world-class guy, but he couldn't teach. And I went to the owner of Remax, Dave Leniger, and I said, "Well, if you really want somebody to teach this class, I can do that." And he just kind of laughed at me. A year later, I get a phone call from them and said, "Hey, Vinny, Tim McBratney just ran off with one of our secretaries, and they're going to go live in Las Vegas. So we've got a job for you." And that's how I went to their headquarters in 1979. And basically had every position there was in the company other than CEO. And I tried to get the job of founder, but that was already taken. So what can you say?
One of the things you were saying last night at dinner I thought was interesting is part of your role was going to all the different brokerage offices. I mean, if you were to try to put a number or a range of how many different brokerage offices you've been to, I mean, what does that even
Thousands. I don't even know. It's thousands. And the fun part is I enjoy the agents. My what drew me to Realty One Group is the CEO there has the same philosophy I do. Our job is to make the lives of our brokers and agents better. And so I used to love to go and talk with agents and offices, the brokers and offices, try to find out what was going on. And gosh, I've probably been to, 20 countries and visited Remax offices in each country. And the one thing that I found that was interesting, everybody talks about differences. I always talk about what do people have in common. And the thing that everybody has in common when you're talking to agents is every agent wants independence. They want to run their business the way they want to run it, not the way somebody tells them how to run it. And the other thing that was just astounding to me is being in the Middle East and being at a broker owner meeting with people from different religions and backgrounds. And it wasn't, you always hear things in the Middle East, boy, this group doesn't like that group and all that sort of thing. But I'm sitting around and I'm fascinated because there's all these broker owners and you know what they're talking about? Their children. And how important their kids were too, because what I've never met yet is a parent that didn't want more for their child than what they had when they were growing up. And that was one of the memories that sticks with me forever.
Yeah, when we were at the Realty One Group Summit in Las Vegas earlier this year, I can't remember who said it, if it was like Brad Inman or something you had said, but the real estate professional today is more powerful as an entrepreneur than they've ever been in the history of real estate. I mean, how do you see that evolving in terms of realtors being able to have really control over their own business in terms of how they market, how they offer services? How are there main ways you feel like that's evolved over the last 40 years?
Of course, you can even go back to 50s, 60s, and, I got into the business in the 70s. And what this was a business that was controlled by the brokers, by the owners of companies. And Remax was one of the first companies that ever really introduced that the agent was the most important person. And that what I enjoy about the company I'm with now is we are very agent-centric. And most of the companies out there, even to this day, they'll tell you they're agent-centric, but they're actually broker and company-centric.
Right.
And what agents want, they, like I said before, they want the independence to run their business the way they want to run it.
Right.
So
one of the things I really enjoyed also just in having conversations with you is I sense from the people around you, and it's just in my experience, that you're a historian of the game, right? And what's fascinating is a lot of the dialogue that we have now, we're on, the back end of a long cycle here. Mm-hmm. I think that's the general consensus, right? And there's a lot of agents that are currently in the business. And so there starts to come, just the sort of the looseness, right, within the industry. And it feels like this is the first time this has ever happened, or, oh, here we go again with, these types of issues. And one of the things that always comes up that I hear from agents is now we have, Zillow and big money and tech, and there's no question Silicon Valley's coming in to try to disrupt and in a lot of ways replace the agent. And what I think is fascinating is more so not that I don't think they're going to replace the agent. I think they can enhance the business. Mm-hmm. I think they can continue to add value. I just think the value proposition for the agent changes. But unpack a little bit of some of, Zillow and like this new money and this new, big businesses and Wall Street coming into the industry. It's like, yeah, this has got to be new, right?
Everybody says that.
Yeah, and then you giggle. And
I do. And, you and I have had this discussion. I wrote down a few notes because I was trying to remember all of the little moves that happened. But, we talk about Compass today. And Compass may not be in Des Moines, Iowa. Compass is a company that's going around and has a lot of money right now. They got a fund like $1.2 billion to go out and fulfill what they said their goals are. And their goals were 2 years ago, we want to be the top company in the top 20 markets. And we'll do that by 2020. And I'm kind of smiling about that. And what that does is it's no different than 1977 was the first time that I noticed big money was coming into the industry. You know, I was brand new in the industry, and the company that came in at that time was Merrill Lynch. And people go, what do you mean Merrill Lynch came in? I said, yeah, Merrill Lynch came in, and what their job basically was to go to the top 20 cities and buy either the number 1, 2, or 3 company in each one of those marketplaces. Because what they were looking for was to be a financial supermarket. Okay, obviously stocks and bonds, and they had all the other things that Merrill Lynch has, and now they wanted to get into real estate because they knew that was the single biggest investment that people had, and they wanted to get a portion of that. So they ended up going and buying these companies, and it didn't last long because in 1986, okay, they had now 400 real estate companies in the United States. And they got sick and tired of the business because they didn't understand realtors. Realtors weren't like stockbrokers, okay? They were more entrepreneurial. So what happened is they ended up selling that to Prudential. Imagine that company. And what happened to Prudential? Prudential ends up selling to Berkshire Hathaway. So some of these big companies that get in, they don't understand the realtors. They don't understand the way we do business. And as a result, they lose faith in what what their business plan was, and they end up selling. We went on, remember we talked a little bit that in 1978, Coldwell Banker gets purchased by Sears, Roebuck and Company. And everybody laughs and goes, they got purchased by Sears? I said, yeah, absolutely they did. And what they wanted, again, they wanted to be the financial supermarket. They also owned at that time Dean Witter stock brokerage, and they also owned Allstate Insurance. So they're thinking about cross-marketing. And their cross-marketing was, boy, wouldn't it be great? People come into the Sears, and back in those days, they used to have a kiosk for each one of those companies. You buy your house from Coldwell Banker. You go to the next kiosk and you get your homeowner's insurance from Allstate and your car insurance. And then you go to Dean Witter and say, oh gosh, I forgot to fund my IRA, and that's what I'm going to do. And also on the way out, you bought your Kenmore washer and dryer, and you went through the garden area and you said, oh, I forgot, I also need a garden hose. So they thought they had everything taken care of when it came to what the consumer wanted financially. So they did that. 1979. Okay, all this stuff happened. A company by the name of Century 21. It was founded in 1971 by Art Bartlett and Marsh Fisher. And in 1970, they built that thing. I still look at Century 21 as being the marvel, and everybody wanted to be Century 21 because they grew so quickly. And they gave everybody what they wanted. And they finally figured it out in real estate franchising because then everybody wanted, there were a lot of mom and pop organizations throughout the United States. And they really didn't have a whole bunch of the large companies like you see today. So what they did is they gave people an image. In other words, they put them in a gold jacket. So when they walked into the supermarket, everybody knew that they sold real estate. And people would ask them questions. They go to church. They all sorts of things. It was just amazing. So they gave them the image. And then they also gave them training, because training, the way that occurred back in those old days was, okay, Vinny, you go out with Adam because Adam's been in the business for 7 years and has a great track record. And you follow him and do whatever he does. And then you'd have Jack, he would follow Marcia, and Marcia would show him the ropes. Well, Marcia and Adam trained differently, so you never had a consistent product and how people were trained. And Century 21 came in with the 2-in-1 system, and they had training for everybody. And the final thing that worked was that they, at that point, did national advertising because they collected from each one of their agents 2% of every commission.
So nobody was doing that at that time?
Nobody was doing that at that time. Wow. So here it is. They're on television. So even though they sold a franchise and it's still the same mom and pop, they were considered to be this huge company. So they gave everybody what they wanted. Well, in 1979, okay, Art and Marsh made a lot of money, so they decided to sell the company to, of all people, TWA, the airlines.
That's my favorite.
I mean, it's just amazing. And
Yeah.
people go, okay, why TWA? And the reason it was TWA is because they also owned two other companies at that time. They owned Hilton Hotels, and they also owned Hertz Rental Car.
Wow.
So their thought process was, when you fly in an airplane, you get off, you rent a car, you stay in a hotel. And a lot of times the reason you're staying in a hotel is because you're in town to buy a home or to look for property. So that was their cross-marketing. And it didn't stop there.
You got a plane, you got the plane, you got the hotel, you got the rent-a-car.
Right.
Why not sell your house?
Absolutely. So they sell it to TWA. In 1985, TWA is starting to have difficulties because of numerous lawsuits and things by past flight attendants, because back in the 60s, by the way, shows you how far we've come. Back in the 1960s, if a flight attendant got pregnant, she got fired.
Really?
So all the moms filed suit against TWA, and they finally won their lawsuit in the early 80s.
Wow.
And they were all given back pay and being able to come on board. The only reason I know that is my wife was a TWA flight attendant.
Really?
And she got laid off because of all the moms that came back. But as we go through this, Adam.
Really quick on the TWA piece.
Mm-hmm.
They were the parent company. So like TWA, the airline, owned Hilton and Hertz.
Yes.
It almost seemed like they would have been like the second or third, like they would have been sort of the sister company to maybe like Hilton. But TWA,
they were big.
They were the top dog.
They were.
That's incredible.
I know. It's very, very funny that we talk about that sort of thing. But TWA had to get rid of Century 21, and they sold them to Metropolitan Life Insurance Company in 1986, I think it was. And then after that, Metropolitan Life Insurance Company sold it to HFS. HFS became Sendant, and then Sendant sold them to Realty.
Interesting.
So,
and Realty owns, what all brokerages does Realty own?
Realty owns Century 21, ERA, Coldwell Banker, Better Homes and Gardens. They also own Corcoran, which is a high-end brand. They own Climb, which is a brand new brand out of San Francisco. And Sotheby's is another one. So they have a full array of real estate companies from one price range to another.
When you're talking to agents in your travels and going to different offices, is there a common fear or challenge that you feel like agents are having in the market today?
I think the real challenge everybody has is having enough information to give to their consumer. And because as we all know, real estate is hyper-local, but it also has a national and international trends to it. And, I remember talking to agents, especially during the downturn. And during the downturn, we were starting to get a lot of people from other countries buying real estate. Our people in the United States couldn't afford it a lot of times. They couldn't get credit, whatever it might be. And I would look at them, and especially even in a town like Des Moines, you go, oh, where am I going to get international buyers from? Well, the international buyers come from your college students. And we would get, I'd talk to them and they go, no, we really don't have it. And I say, well, do you have a college there? And they go, yeah, all of a sudden, I did get a buyer. That's right. We had one from China. We had one from Germany. We had a couple of people from Canada that came down. So people were getting that. And so sometimes, even though we look and we think hyper-local, sometimes we have to look and see what else is coming into our marketplace. Agents need education. They need tools. But when you have a tool, the thing that's most key about it is understanding how to use it. I've told a story for years about my wife. She's the handyman in the family. And when she was a little girl, she used to follow her dad around all the time because, she loved to fix things. And she, one of the greatest gifts I ever gave her was a set of Tomboy tools. And they were pink hammers and all that sort of thing. And she's got her, she's got her tool chest that would rival anybody from a NASCAR organization that she rolls into the garage. But the one thing I always say about that is my wife knew how to use tools, and she could build anything because she knew how to use them. Today, there are so many tools out there that agents are afraid of, that they're there to enhance their business and to make their business easier for them. So they have to get over the fear of learning it and say, oh gosh, I don't want to look stupid. That isn't what you need to do. You need to get there, learn how to use these things. It's going to make your job so much more easy for your consumer.
That's what's interesting. I mean, I've been licensed 15 years, and what has evolved was in the past, we had more control of that information. We had a lot more of the information in terms of, pricing and location, but the consumer is so much better educated today as they come in. And so that's one of the things I think is interesting of how the value proposition is evolving for the realtor in terms of adding value in different ways and really making a customer service experience as that professional for them, rather than a lot of times of just essentially, I'm just going to give you, it's a 4-bed, 3-bath, 220,000, and just adding so much more. Where do you feel like sort of that value proposition is evolved to this point? How do you feel like that value proposition continues to evolve over the next 10 years in terms, because like the tools become, like in my mind, I feel like sometimes it's where do I even start? Because now with the technology, there's so many different tools, and I'll try one a little bit and it's not effective. Try another one a little bit, it's not effective. And so many of it is just sort of committing to it and playing that long game, which I think starts to be a challenge for just business owners in general, right? Like it's easy to sort of do a short-term thing, and if it doesn't work, try something different rather than just triple down on it and keep plowing forward. But with those tools, it just seems like the value proposition for the agent is evolving. And I'm a firm believer, I think the agent is more powerful than they've ever been. How do you feel like they can harness those tools to where the value add to the customer is going?
Number one, consumers need realtors more than ever now. There's so much information out there that sometimes the consumer doesn't know how to basically process that information. I have a son, and my daughter-in-law just put a contract on a house. And it was interesting, the questions they were asking me. And, and finally my son looked at me and he goes, Dad, what we needed more than anything from a realtor was the knowledge and wisdom. And I kind of smiled about that. And that doesn't mean somebody that's only been in the business doesn't have knowledge and wisdom. They do, and what does that lead to? You look at, more experienced agents and things like that. But somebody that might have gotten into our business maybe a few years ago, but had a background prior to that in some sort of customer service or in sales or whatever it might be, they've got a lot of that knowledge and wisdom they can bring to the table and guide the consumer today, because that's exactly what they needed more than anything else was, this is the way we do things. This is the way the timeline works. This is what you need to do now. And they were so happy when they were told what to do and how to do it. Not everybody, just because they read a book, says, I can handle this thing, or I've got all the information. I'm just going to go on the internet. I'm going to buy my home that way. That isn't what happens. That isn't what people want.
Yeah. So a little bit of change of gears here. Somebody that we love here on the What's Up Grubb podcast is Jim Nantz. We think you'd have a tremendous voice here on our podcast, but it's my understanding you actually have met Jim Nantz and have a good Jim Nantz story.
Jim Nantz is one of the nicest men I've ever met. When you hear him on television and radio and all the other things, you go, gosh, great voice. And, what's really behind there? A lot of times there's just a shell there. Actually, there's a lot of substance. My wife and I took all of the kids and their wives and all that sort of thing out for dinner a couple of years ago. I think it was New Year's Eve, actually, in Denver. And it just so happens that we're at the Palm Restaurant in the Westin Hotel. It's one of our favorite places in Denver to go for a steak. And Jim Nantz is in the restaurant. And I go, wow, isn't that cool? And all of a sudden, Jim Nantz walks over to our table, and he said, Vinny, I know who you are. And I said, how in the world do you know who I am? And he goes, well, the lady who's the general manager here, Kathy, I asked her who you were because you have a bottle of wine on your table called The Calling. And he goes, I own that winery. And he goes, I just wanted to come over and meet the guy who has great taste in wine. And I started laughing. And first of all, he's very tall. Didn't expect him to be 6'5".
Really?
You know, yeah, really tall guy.
I didn't know that.
And so he's standing around, and what was so amazing to me and fascinated me was he wanted to get to know every single person at the table. So he went around to each and every one of my kids and their spouses and spent like 5 or 6 or 7 minutes with them, finding out who they were, what their education was, what they're doing now, what their dreams were. And I'm thinking to myself, nobody does this, especially a guy this famous. So I'll tell you, I'm a big Jim Nantz fan. And now that I get to be on this podcast, which is going to be listened to by at least 3 or 4 people,
yes.
It's going to be my wife, and your brother, I think.
My mom listens.
Okay, good. Hey, we got another one. We'll buy The Calling. Okay, that's a good wine.
Yeah.
It's out of Sonoma County.
Now we're talking just another angle to try to get Jim Nantz on our podcast.
There you go.
I like it. Well, it means a lot you coming out. And I got to tell you, for somebody that's been in the business and just the energy and the passion that you bring every single day, I think is really admirable. I think it's contagious. I think it's really fun to be around. And you're certainly somebody that I've looked up to. I've always enjoyed the conversation. So it means a lot you coming out and talking to us on the podcast today. So.
Adam, thanks so much. I really appreciate this.
Yep. Thanks, man.
Okay.